On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we have Mr. Brian Chee and Mr. Curtis Franklin back on the show. The FCC is a hard and complex job, and I'll tell you one thing, there's a bit of controversy surrounding the role, so we definitely are going to talk about that. Databases are challenging to manage. Wouldn't be great not to have to worry about scaling and sharding. Well, today we have Nick Van Wiggeren. He's VP of Engineering with PlanetScale, and we're going to chat databases, and by the end of the show, he just might have convinced you to jump over to Managed Database as a Service. You definitely shouldn't miss it. TWiT on the set.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 534, recorded March 10th, 2023. Never cross the shards. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by ACI Learning. Tech is one industry where opportunities outpace growth, especially in cybersecurity. 1/3 of information security jobs require a cybersecurity certification. To maintain your competitive edge across audit, IT, and cybersecurity readiness, visit go.acilearning.com/twit. And by ZipRecruiter. One of the biggest 2023 hiring challenges is standing out to top talent. Break through the clutter and attract the most qualified candidates for your team with ZipRecruiter's matching technology. Try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/twit. And by Collide. Collide is a device trust solution that ensures that if a device isn't secure, it can't access your apps. It's zero trust for Okta. Visit collide.com/twit and book a demo today. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big world of the enterprise. I can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals and the experts, are their very own senior analyst, principal analyst at Omdia. We have to make sure we get that right. The man who eats and sleeps the enterprise. We have our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, how's the new role treating you? How are you doing there?
It is fine. I'm enjoying it. It is, I wish I could say it was a dramatic change, but it's not. I'm still working on the same team, doing the same stuff, but I get to order new business cards. So there's that. Looking forward to getting a couple of big reports off my desk. One on cybersecurity awareness training that has been forever in the birthing, and another coming up on fundamentals of risk quantification, which is a very popular and surprisingly complicated topic in the industry right now. It's one of those things where everyone wants to know just how much risk they have in their organization, and they want some way to pin a number on it. The problem is finding two ways of doing that agree with one another. And so it's fun to research. It's giving me a chance to talk to a bunch of people. And speaking of talking to people, I am still working on finalizing my schedule for the RSA conference, which is coming up in San Francisco in April. Looking forward to being out there and meeting lots of people within the industry. Always a good time to be out amongst them.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Welcome back, Curtis. Well, we also have to thank welcome back our very own Mr. Brian Chee. He's busy at the Orlando Fairgrounds down nowadays. How's it going over there, Cheebert? Keeping you busy over there?
So. It's not bad, but one thing that's really fun is one of the members at our makerspace had a bunch of older surveillance cameras, in this case, IP cameras, that he was willing to donate, plus a couple of the high quality Raspberry Pi cameras that I'm going to go and add. We seem to have a few problems with street gangs deciding they're going to hop the fence. So we're going to try and see if we can take some wind out of their sails. And, the other thing that I'm having fun with is tinkering. Gotta tinker. We have all kinds of really cool things happening at the makerspace. That new fiber laser is spectacular. It's a rabbit, and I'm planning on etching all kinds of stuff. And one of the most useful things I saw recently is someone etching larger numbers on their wrenches so you could actually tell a 10 millimeter from a 3/8.
Very nice, very nice. I started dipping mine in that plastic dip stuff. That was my only way to tell the difference between the sizes sometimes, by just grabbing them. But I love the etching idea. Very cool. Well, thanks, Cheebert, for being here. We should definitely get started. Lots to talk about today. Lots of busy stuff in here in the enterprise. The FCC is a very hard and complex job, so running it probably is just as hard, right? Well, we're going to talk about a bit of controversy surrounding the role and the organization. We'll get into that. Wouldn't you like to not worry about scaling your backend, your database? Well, today we have Nick Van Wiggeren. He's VP of Engineering at PlanetScale, and we're going to chat about databases. That's right. And by the end of the show, he just might have convinced you to jump over to managed databases as a service. So you definitely should stick around. Lots to talk about here. But before we do, we have to jump into this week's news blips. Security appliances are usually the number one thing you think about on your network to ensure that they have the latest patches and are configured correctly for your network perimeter. However, that's the one thing that is also the most targeted to breach the network. According to this Ars Technica article, threat actors with connections to the Chinese government are infecting sonic wall appliances with malware, which actually survives even after firmware updates. Now, the device they are targeting is well-known in the IT world. It's the Sonic Wall's Secure Mobile Access 100. Now, people use it to grant granular access controls to remote users, provide VPN connections to organization networks, and set unique profiles to each employee. It's so prevalent that back in 2021, the device had a sophisticated hack campaign against it, uncovering a zero-day. It looks like this device is back in the crosshairs again because security firm Mandiant has reported that Chinese hackers have maintained a long-term position of power by running malware on unpatched Sonic Walls SMAs. In order for them to achieve the ability to have the hack or the malware persist even after updates, the malware actually checks for available firmware updates every 10 seconds. When an update becomes available, the malware actually copies the archived file for backup, unzips it, mounts it, and then copies the entire package of malicious files to it. So it actually redeploys itself. That's pretty cool. Cool in a bad sense, I could say. The malware also adds a backdoor root user to the mounted file. Then the malware rezips the file so it's ready for installation. And the main purpose of the malware appears to be stealing cryptographically hashed passwords for all logged in users. It also provides a web shell that the threat actor can use to install new malware. Now, last week, Sonic Wall published an advisory that urged SMA 100 users to upgrade to a specific version. That's 10.2.1.7 or higher. Those versions include enhancements such as file integrity monitoring and anomalous process identification. Now, that would mean you either find a way to flash this device to get rid of that malware or ensure you maintain visibility into traffic and logins for the foreseeable future.
Hey, remember all those folks who love to brag that they enjoyed Linux because you never see any malware on the platform? You know them, they tend to hang out with all the Mac OS people. Well, now they may be set to join the rest of the IT industry because hackers have begun deploying the IceFire ransomware against Linux enterprise networks in a noted shift for what was once Windows-only malware. A story over at Dark Reading reports that ransomware actors have been targeting Linux systems in increasing numbers in recent weeks and months. This is notable not least because in comparison to Windows, Linux is more difficult to deploy ransomware against, particularly at scale, according to Alex Delamotte, a security researcher at SentinelOne. IceFire, which was first discovered last March, is your basic vanilla ransomware that happens to be aligned with big game hunting, or BGH, ransomware families. What makes ransomware BGH? Well, it's characterized by double extortion, targeting large enterprises using numerous persistence mechanisms and invading analysis by deleting log files. IceFire's attack flow is pretty straightforward. Once the target network is breached, the IceFire attackers steal copies of any valuable or otherwise interesting data on their targeted machines. Then comes the encryption. Where IceFire was once primarily used in campaigns against the healthcare, education, and technology sectors, recent attacks have focused around entertainment and media organizations, primarily in Middle Eastern countries, say Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. And since most business Linux systems are servers, phishing isn't the most effective infection vector. Instead, recent IceFire attacks have exploited a CVE 2022-47986, which is a critical remote code execution vulnerability in the IBM Aspera data transfer service. This one's bad with a CVSS rating of 9.8. So why Linux in the first place, since it's harder to attack? Three big reasons have popped up in conversations with analysts. First, since Linux tends to be a server OS, it's a high-value target. Second, Linux is seen as unexploited and highly vulnerable market, so sort of fresh for exploitation. Finally, containerization does many good things, but it also vastly expands the attack surface for exploits. The targets may have changed, but the lessons for protection remain the same. Update, make sure your deployments aren't stupid, and make sure your network-based protection is up to the task.
Well, this Ars Technica story is in the category of this is why we can't have nice things. Well, what's happening is this. Thousands are being scammed by AI voices mimicking loved ones in emergencies. Well, in 2022, was stolen through thousands of imposter phone scams. AI models designed to closely simulate a person's voice are making it easier for bad actors to mimic loved ones and scam vulnerable people out of thousands of dollars, according to a story from the Washington Post. While quickly evolving in sophistication, some AI-generated software requires just a few sentences of audio to convincingly produce speech that conveys the sound and emotional tone of a speaker's voice, while others need as little as 3 seconds. For those targeted, which is often the elderly, according to the Post, it can be increasingly difficult to detect when a voice is inauthentic, even when the emergency circumstances described by scammers seem implausible. Well, I, for one, am looking forward to having AI tools to make my personal assistants more like Jarvis and less like Robbie the Robot. But like anything nowadays, someone has to spoil it by trying to cheat us, which really fulfills that old saw, this is why we can't have nice things. Well, the really scary part is that someone could feed a monologue from TWiT into the system and deep fake a Cheebert. I guess I'm just going to have to vary my voice on a regular basis during the show, just like I vary my signature and middle initials to avoid forged signatures. Bleh.
I think after almost 20 years of this show, I think you're out of luck there, Chubert. But it wouldn't be an enterprise week without a leak. This week, according to the Washington Post, it was the members of the House and their staff that were impacted. That's right. Their personal information was exposed after a data breach of the Washington, D.C. health insurance marketplace. Now, senators and their staff were also affected by the breach, but did not appear that data beyond their names and those of their family were exposed. Now, the FBI is investigating and found that they could buy sensitive personal information for the DC Health link on the dark web, according to the letter sent by House leadership to the marketplace, including, quote, names of spouses, dependent children, their social security numbers, and home addresses. Not good. Now, a broker on the online crime forum claimed to have records of on 170,000 DC HealthLink customers and was offering to sell the data. Now, if nothing else, it proves that no system is too small for hackers to target and siphon important related information out. And in this case, about our lawmakers and government representatives. I'm truly interested to see what happens next, seeing the recent cybersecurity agenda by this White House has just come out. I hope it's just not another slap in the wrist. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, we have the bites. But before we get to the bites, we do have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week Enterprise Tech, and that's ACI Learning. Now, for the last decade, our partners at IT Pro have brought you engaging and entertaining IT training to level up your career or organization. Now, IT Pro is part of ACI Learning. Now, with IT Pro, ACI Learning is expanding its reach and production capabilities, and it's offering you the content and learning mode you need at any stage in your development. Whether you're at the very beginning of your career or looking to move up in your sector, ACI Learning is here to support your growth, not only in IT, but cybersecurity and audit readiness as well. Now, one of the most widely recognized beginner certifications is the CompTIA A Plus certification. Now, CompTIA courses with IT Pro from ACI Learning make it easy to go from daydreaming about the career in IT to actually launching it. Now, earning certificates opens doors to most entry-level IT positions, and it supplies potential promotions for those who are already in the field. Now, tech is one industry where opportunities outpace growth, especially in cybersecurity. Now, a recent LinkedIn study predicts IT jobs will be the most demanding roles in 2023, so there's no time to waste here. About 1/3 of information security jobs require a cybersecurity certification. That's compared to actually 23% of all IT jobs out there. Now, while organizations are really hungry for cybersecurity talent, the cyber skills gap grows bigger each day. The average salary for a cybersecurity specialist is $116,000. ACI's Learning's information security analyst and cybersecurity specialist programs can actually help and get you certified. Now, in 2022, the global cybersecurity workforce gap increased by 26.2% compared to 2021. Now, ACI Learnings offers multiple cybersecurity training programs that can actually prepare you to enter or advance within this exciting industry. Now, the most popular cybersecurity certifications offered are CISSP, EC Council, Certified Ethical Hacker, Certified Network Defender, Cybersecurity Audit School, and Cybersecurity Frameworks. Now, where and how you learn really matters. ACI Learning offers fully customizable training for all types of learners, whether preferred in person or on demand or remote. Take learning beyond the classroom. Now, explore everything ACI Learning offers with IT Pro, Audit Pro, including enterprise solutions, webinars, and the Skeptical Auditor podcast, practice labs, learning hubs, and their partnership program. Tech is one industry where opportunities outpace growth, especially in cybersecurity. 1/3 of information security jobs require a cybersecurity certification. To maintain your competitive edge across audit, IT, and cybersecurity readiness, visit go.acilearning.com/twit. That's go.acilearning.com/twit. Don't forget to use our special code TWIT30 to get 30% off standard or premium individual IT Pro membership. And we thank ACI Learning for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's time for the bites. Now, leading the FCC is a tough and challenging job, and it's open to a level of scrutiny that's not for the faint of heart. Well, according to this Ars Technica Roll and article, the president's nominee, Gigi Sohn, for the FCC open seat withdrew her nomination. Man, her reason, governing this sector is so far underwater that it may be unreachable. That's right. Here's her quote. When I accepted this nomination over 16 months ago, I could not have imagined the legions of cable and media industry lobbyists, their bought and paid for surrogates, and dark money political groups with bottomless pockets would distort my over 30-year history as a consumer advocate into an absurd caricature of blatant lies. Yikes. The truth is, what happened next was kind of worse in my eyes. She and her family were actually exposed to attacks and threats due to this withdrawal. Now, lots of controversy and disagreement going around here, especially regarding her original nomination. In fact, she had some interesting views that weren't so popular with parties or even telecom giants out there. As she noted, the telecom industry would prefer a commissioner that doesn't want to expand regulation of internet providers. Now, Comcast originally apparently lobbied against her behind the scenes, despite not publicly opposing the nomination. After 2 years with a 50-50 split in the Senate, Democrats now had a 51-49 majority, including 3 independents who caucus with Democrats. Now, without matching support, Sohn would actually still have been approved in a 50-50 vote, with the vice president providing the tiebreaker. It's unfortunate that she had to withdraw here. And Chibitor, I'm gonna bring you in, and I want to bring Kurt back in here. I want to go to you first, though, because does this mean that Comcast is now celebrating behind closed doors?
I would say probably every large ISP in the United States is celebrating, because I don't know if anyone know. I don't know if it was just coincidence or not. But just yesterday, or was it the day before, Spectrum raised their rates. This is going to be a very, very common headline, in my opinion. Your broadband's going to be more expensive when choice is taken away and competition is no longer present. You're going to start having people setting the rates at whatever they feel like. Now, keep in mind, just yesterday, I started doing a few comparisons using tools like Nextdoor and Facebook and other social media, and started trolling for how much people are paying for their broadband. And just interesting enough, one person literally 1 mile away from me is paying almost $50 a month more for their 1 gig AT&T fiber than I am. And I think the big reason is the neighborhood that I'm in actually has 3 different choices, not one like where he lives. So I got this bad feeling that with an FCC forever deadlocked because of partisan politics, we're probably going to start seeing rates rise. We're going to start seeing wireless internet service providers having a much, much harder time getting started. And I think this might be the first or second nail in the coffin of community broadband, which in my mind is really, really sad.
What do you think, Curtis? Is this something that just proves that this entire FCC board is bought and paid for by the industry?
I don't know about the whole board. Perhaps just part of it. But now let me give some full disclosure here. One of the slams made against this candidate was that she had worked with far left radical groups, and one of the far left radical groups that was listed was the EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation. I am a member of the EFF. I support what they do in the same way that I pay dues to the ACLU. I'm a big fan of free speech. To me, the big issue in front of the FCC, the one that gets a lot of people really unhappy, has less to do with rates and more to do with regulated behavior. Because how different entities are treated, whether they are treated as a common carrier, or treated as a publisher, or treated as a broadcaster, matters greatly when it comes to how they can be held accountable for the content that they carry. And what a lot of entities right now want very much is to be able to carry lots of material and be responsible for none of it. So we're seeing this in conversations about whether, and it's coming from both sides of the political spectrum, because on the one hand, you have people saying that everyone from Meta to Google to Twitter should be responsible for the political material, the January 6th content that was on there, for the misinformation about the COVID crisis. And on the other hand, you have conservatives saying that they should not be allowed to stop any particular information going on. So you have both sides saying that they have trouble with the way it's going now. And I think that what the carriers and the services and the ISPs and everyone else really wants is certainty, but each of them wants certainty that leaves them with as little exposure to regulation and lawsuits as possible. And what everyone is going to be doing is jockeying to have that key fifth member who will keep them in the middle of whatever road we appear to be on right now. So I suspect that's it. Will there be a fifth member? Yes. Will it likely be someone who has been less visible with their advocacy over the past decade? Yes. So we'll just have to see who the current administration can come up with that tries to thread the long row of needles that must be threaded in order to get this next nominee over the line.
You bring up a good point. I mean, you just said obviously that it's a long set of needles you have to thread to get this going. I mean, we talked about a 2-year thing going on here, and again, there was a split for a long time until they finally had some majority, but then there was some votes against this, and so that in fact we needed the vice president to break the vote here. Does this just mean that even the next person, no matter who it is that they bring in, is going to be in that same boat? That we're not going to be able to bring them in until the end of this to the end of this president's regime, basically?
Well, the math in the Senate doesn't change. The math in the Senate is 51-49 for the next 2 years. So what they have to do is come up with a nominee that they can have all of the Democrats support, because the likelihood is great that they could nominate Newt Gingrich and the Republicans would vote against him just on principle of not approving a Biden nominee. But what they're going to need to do is have someone who can get at least 50 and probably 51 solid Democratic supporters. That's going to be a non-trivial issue.
So what do you think? You said something interesting that I'm actually want to dig into a little bit. You said it's the end of WISPs as we know it. Why is that? Why do you feel like it's the end of that?
Okay, so WISPs have one thing that works against them and makes it harder. They have to cross boundaries. A WISP doesn't necessarily have the ability to be able to afford to be home to multiple upstream ISPs. Most of the time, they'll have to take a fiber feed or something from, a big player, like the AT&Ts or the Comcast and so forth. So the wireless internet service providers themselves tend to be much, much smaller, and they, for the most part, don't have the ability for having things at scale. So one of the big things that I heard over and over and over again at Wispapalooza and Wisp America was, how do we cooperate? How do we figure out a way to get upstream feeds at scale by combining our efforts? And I think it's going to come down to how much support the smaller ISPs like WISPs and community broadband folks have within the FCC. So that fifth member of the board is supposed to be the person that is the tiebreaker. Personally, I think if I could have my wish as a lobbyist for the communications industry, is that the fifth seat, or maybe there should be a sixth seat, I don't know, one or the other, should be specifically for a consumer advocate. Gigi Sohn was so much a consumer advocate that she managed to tee off all the big boys. Personally, I think a permanent seat should be established that is specifically the voice for the consumer. So, Gigi, I'm sorry that you got hit by all that. I can, sympathize with you. When I was working on trying to break the Hawaiian telephone monopoly in Hawaii for intra-LATA communications, a full year before the feds did it, there were, shall we say, a few personal attacks in my direction. Heck, I was barred from the Hawaiian telephone building as persona non grata for almost 4 years. I would very much like to see consumer advocacy be a permanent part of the FCC board. And consumers definitely need a voice. And sadly, it's the voices of the big ISPs that have an almost unlimited budget. And
Right.
isn't that supposed to be illegal?
Right. Well said, Gebert. Well, hopefully things will clear up soon. We'll have to put a little magic on that. Thank you, guys. Well, next up we have our guest, really exciting guest. We're going to talk a lot about managed database as a service, really fun stuff. But before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's ZipRecruiter. Now, are you hiring for your team? A lot of people are hiring still, right? Despite current headlines, several industries like hospitality, healthcare are heading for hiring boom. No matter what your industry you're in, if you're you need to hire, go to ziprecruiter.com/twiit and try it for free. Cloud services that run smoothly, including deployments, availability, and scale, and someone to manage it and keep things healthy. It's hard to find someone to do that well, especially at scale. However, with ZipRecruiter's tools and methods of matching candidates to roles, it's actually pretty easy. I've seen the end results of such matches. ZipRecruiter uses its powerful matching technology to find qualified candidates for a wide range of roles. See a candidate who'd be perfect for your job. ZipRecruiter makes it easy to send them personal invites, so they're more likely to apply. Now, ZipRecruiter also has user-friendly dashboards that lets you filter, review, and rate your candidates all from one place. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate in the first day. Find quality candidates fast and let ZipRecruiter keep your team growing strong. Go to ziprecruiter.com/twiit to try ZipRecruiter for free. That's ziprecruiter.com/TWiet. And we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's my favorite part of the show. We actually get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the TWiT Riot. Today we have Nick Van Wiggeren. He's VP of Engineering at PlanetScale. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. Now, our audience, again, Chee probably told you before the show, our audience is a wide spectrum of experience. They're all chapters of their career. They love to hear people's origin stories. Can you take us through a journey through tech and what brought you to PlanetScale?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my journey through tech started in internet relay chat, over 20 years ago at this point, getting on the internet and first writing my first lines of code and figuring out how to put all of the pieces of the internet together with just the resources I had available online. Over time, I got really interested in infrastructure and in kind of figuring out what powers the internet. So my first couple jobs, I went in and just kind of thought, hey, I'd like to work at the pieces that build the cloud, and I'd like to work at the pieces that build the modern infrastructure. So I've wound my way through VMs, I've wound my way through building clouds, networking, all of these kinds of things, and ended at PlanetScale, which is a serverless database provider, kind of backing some of the world's biggest websites. And that's just such a great spot for me because it's exactly what I wanted to do when I was 12, figuring out the first couple lines of code that I could write.
Now, there's a number of. I like to talk about managed databases right up front because I think it's a really interesting database as a service. It's really interesting because I use a lot of these types of things in my normal work day, and of course a lot of my services. Now, there are some managed. There's quite a bit of managed service databases out there, but there's some technology that PlanetScale is using that really impacts multiple facets when you're using a database. Can you tell us a little bit about the Vitesse technology and like what makes it unique?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So Vitesse was invented at YouTube kind of before it was acquired by Google. And they were just running into some of those really common scaling issues that internet businesses did at the time. They had too much data, too many queries, and just too much to do. And they couldn't scale their, single MySQL instances to a certain point. So they invented Vitesse as kind of a proxy layer. I call it a jetpack on top of MySQL. So still built on some of that tried and true technology, but they were then able to scale their databases to hundreds of instances, thousands of instances, and larger, and kind of achieve the scale that was novel at the time for companies like YouTube, and ended up producing this open source project that we're built on top of that allows businesses to kind of reach scale that a normal database just couldn't even sniff at.
Some of the interesting things I was reading a little bit about Vitesse is like, obviously, sharding is a hard thing to do. Like, in fact, some organizations, they don't even know how to do it. Like, I have talked to them and said, hey, like, how have you thought about sharding this and splitting the data so you have faster queries on these data? And then when you have to join it, you can, eventually do that into different shards and blah, 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 blah. And they really just don't understand what I'm talking about. Like, How does Vitess actually create shards? Does it do it automatically? Does it do it on demand? How does it manage that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to say it's a collaborative exercise. So Vitess kind of gives you all of the tools, the data modeling utilities, the mapping utilities for you to take your schema and your queries and figure out how to divvy them up. So it's not kind of an automatic, everything just shards and splits instantly. It kind of gives you a brand new toolbox and lets you go, how do I access my data? How do I want my data distributed? And you can kind of then, when you get your head in that world, you can go and say, all right, now I understand how this works. Now I understand how to divvy my data up. And then we're good to go from there. So it's not instant, it's not automatic. And, we find, especially in the enterprise and with large customers, automatic generally means it doesn't work and you're going to need to drop down to doing it yourself anyway. So we kind of cut to the chase and give you the tools to distribute your data.
Now, one interesting I've seen with obviously the sharding concept is the fact that sometimes it impacts performance, and sometimes cross shard transactions are really hard. And in fact, there's several protocols used to do it nowadays, but some of them impact performance due to it. What does Vitess use? How does it manage all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I give people advice on how to use Vitess, one of the first things I tell them is try not to do cross-shard transactions. Vitess promises this, what we say, I call near linear scalability. So you go from 16 to 32 instances, you get twice the throughput, you go, kind of scale beyond there. As soon as you start to do cross-shard transactions, as soon as your queries start to touch multiple machines, you lose that linear scalability, right? If you've got 32 queries sent to one machine or one query sent to 32 machines, it's kind of the same thing. And so, while we support a lot of this and kind of Vitess is able to kind of make some of this work, at the end of the day, this is where that collaboration or that push comes from to get that perfect balance and to get that perfect scalability. Vitess gives you the tools to understand when you're kind of breaking the code and hitting multiple shards and things like that. And it gives you tools to kind of cobble together what you need. But the end result and the end goal is really give you the tools to separate that so you don't need to worry about kind of coordinating across shards and things like that.
It's amazing. So one thing about as a service scenarios, I mean, I use functions as a service, applications as a service. They always seem to minimize cost quite a bit.
Yep.
And I'm really curious. So I'm going to give you the obligatory scenario that we usually give is a small business, 10,000 employees. They have a ton of customer data, inventory data, product data, that kind of thing. And they want to move to PlanetScale. What's kind of the initial cost, obviously, to migrate to them, and what is the cost thereafter? What's the kind of the pricing structure? Is it like ingress egress data? Is it querying? Is it storage? How do you guys manage that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we really have two pricing dimensions. And much like a lot of serverless products, like you said, right, we try to charge on usage. We want you to use the product more. We want you to get your money's worth as you're using it. So we charge on data storage, just like, pretty much any database. You put data in us, we've got to store it. But then we charge for query, read, and write throughput. So instead of charging on the size of the machine, instead of charging on just, the size box you're getting where you've got to pick from a big drop down, the more you use it, the more we scale it and the more you pay for it. So if you're a small business just getting started, you get the smallest instance size, $29 a month. And over time, you can grow all the way to $29,000 a month with the same database. Eventually, you have to shard and eventually you have to kind of scale in pieces there. But the goal is just to be able to hit every step along the way and get you to where you need to be.
It's a great model. I do want to compare this a bit to a lot of the bigger companies out there, like for instance, MongoDB and their Atlas service. Like obviously, it seems that PlanetScale abstracts away, sharding, the compute power, how to run queries, all that resource dedication. Like MongoDB obviously makes you pay for different scales and that kind of thing. How does that mean things are optimized on the hood? Like for instance, companies like to know that things are going to be performant all the time, no matter how much data they're going to have. And with Mongo, you technically pay for performance. You kind of pay for different tiers of resources and that kind of thing, machines, dedicated tiers, that kind of thing. How does that stand up with something like PlanetScale? Do you guys guarantee a certain level of query performance or data scale, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we go in and on our base tiers, you get a pretty small instance size, you get some dedicated resources, but not a lot. And as you scale up, eventually you reach a certain size where you probably don't want to auto scale. You probably don't want to be kind of part of the whims of what a computer thinks your query performance has to be in the last 5-10 minute period. And so as you get to a certain spot, we actually transition over to a more resource-based pricing. And those are generally businesses that are mature enough and kind of know enough about their demand and know enough about their cost to be able to say, look, Nick, at this point, we're going to need this many resources. In 6 months, we're projected to grow, up to this level. So it's not all auto scaling and it's not all perfect. At a certain point, what we found is businesses want the predictability in costs, the predictability in performance, and the predictability in understanding what growth looks like. So we work with them kind of as part of that whole journey. And that includes getting off of the serverless pricing, similar to how a lot of businesses start on something like Lambda and then end up deploying on something where, again, it's much more predictable. Maybe that comes with scale getting a little bit harder, but on the flip side, it's very predictable.
Right. I want to shift a little bit because obviously one of the top of minds, a lot of the things that we cover on this show, although enterprise seems to sometimes focus on security. And I know one of the biggest things that, companies have a problem with when they shard and manage the access to those shards and making sure that they have the correct service principles that do it, and then how you join that data, who has access to that data. It's like, how does PlanetScale actually manage all of this and kind of secure the back end and secure access to it? It's because it's a service, you have to access it as a service.
That's a fantastic question. And, we spend a lot of our time making sure that we build customer trust. So it's everything from the little things. You can't connect to the database unless you're using modern TLS. You don't get to generate your own passwords. We generate all of your passwords for you. So we make sure there's nothing insecure, all the way over to kind of how we segregate the systems, encrypt your data, and build the whole platform. It's designed from the ground up. And we've taken pieces of, open source projects we use like Vitesse, but we've taken pieces of that and we've actually rewritten them ourselves to make sure that we're kind of enforcing the right boundaries and able to meet any compliance that's needed, able to meet kind of any requirement that a customer has, while making sure as well that the system's flexible. So this is just woven into our DNA, which is really the only way to build products, I think, in 2023 and beyond. You've got to make sure that you think of security as first and not something that someone kind of hits you with over the head 6 months into a product life cycle, but you take it into account from day one.
Do want to bring my co-host back in because they're chomping at the bit here. But before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Collide. Collide is a device trust solution that ensures unsecured devices can't access your apps. Now, Collide has some big news. If you're an Okta user, Collide can get your entire fleet to 100% compliance. Collide patches one of the major holes in zero trust architectures, device compliance. Now, think about it. Your identity provider only lets known devices log into apps, but just because a device is known doesn't mean it's in a secure state. In fact, plenty of the devices in your fleet probably shouldn't be trusted. Maybe they're running on out-of-date OS versions, or maybe they're unencrypted credentials lying around. If a device isn't compliant or isn't running the Collide agent, it can't access the organization's SaaS apps or other resources. So the device user can't log into your company's cloud apps until they fix the problem on their end. It's that simple. Now, for example, a device will be blocked if an employee doesn't have an up-to-date browser. Now, using end-user remediation helps drive your fleet to 100% compliance without overwhelming your IT team. That's a key result there. Now, without Collide, IT teams have no way to solve these compliance issues or stop insecure devices from logging in. Now, with Collide, you can set and enforce compliance across your entire fleet, including Mac, Windows, and Linux. Collide is unique in that it makes device compliance part of the authentication process. When a user logs in with Okta, Collide alerts them to compliance issues and prevents unsecured devices from logging in. It's security you can feel good about because Collide puts transparency and respect for users at the center of the product. To sum it up, Collide's method means fewer support tickets, less frustration, and most importantly, 100% fleet compliance. That's collide.com/TWiT to learn more or book a demo. That's KOLIDE.com/TWiT. And we thank Collide for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we'll be talking with Nick Van Wiggeren. He's VP of Engineering at PlanetScale about managed databases as a service. I want to bring my co-host back in. Cheebert, you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm big on instrumentation. And one of the cute things, when we start getting into, we've got no code, low code, we've got this, that, and the other thing, we got this widget and this as a service and so forth. But one of the things that I don't hear a lot about is, how am I going to instrument this? How do I know when something's wrong? What kinds of tools, what kinds of instrumentation does PlanetScale provide so I can know how my data is doing?
And I completely agree. With managed services and pretty much any service, you've got to think, it's still a server, even if it's serverless, there's still a process running, there's code running. And so pretty early into the product lifecycle, we created something called PlanetScale Insights. And what that is kind of a one-stop shop dashboard where you can figure out, here's how my queries are performing, here's how my latency is on my queries and things like that. And it's actually one of the areas that we're investing the most in over this whole year, because the fact of the matter is that as much as we wish we could make everything magically just perform perfectly, you have to be able to give that kind of back pressure to developers and to system administrators, or they're never going to be able to get the information they know to how to make their stuff better. So this is actually, I think, one of the hardest parts of running a managed service in general, is figuring out what's your responsibility and what responsibility you have to give to users so that they can use your service better.
Okay, the world is changing. Hybrid clouds are now a reality, or at least we hope they are. So the day of, gee, I might have a portion in AWS, but another portion in Google, and maybe a third portion on-prem. Does PlanetScale provide ways of securing those intercloud links and still reflect how it's doing in the instrumentation?
Absolutely. So we see a lot of people at various different stages in their cloud journey. And this is again something that's been really fun in my role, is to take really big companies and figure out what they're running on-prem, what they're evaluating doing in different clouds. Are they, a lot of them are using, like you said, both Amazon and Google and Azure and maybe other setups as well. And so a lot of what we end up doing is figuring out, okay, here's how we can deploy our resources into any of the cloud accounts that you want. So we actually have this deployment topology we call PlanetScale Managed. We've come up with the term Cloud Prem for it. And the idea is that you actually bring your own cloud account, and we come and we actually build a whole PlanetScale infrastructure in that cloud account. Then we can do secure links between clouds. We can do secure links to your on-prem, and we can actually help both lift and shift you out of the cloud, but also get a steady state kind of hybrid model running if your application servers are still on premises or a different database is still on premises. We actually can kind of make a secure containment area, shuffle data back and forth and shuffle application information back and forth, and give you the tools to either go to the cloud or continue to run partially in the cloud. And these kinds of little math operations that we do are just so much fun. It's take a piece here, take a piece here, take a piece here, and then you've got someone's production environment, and you get to help design it with them. And that's really part of the fun of, I think, selling a managed service, is getting to do that with customers.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, I was reading the material that was sent over, and it talked about you being a transactional database. And now I have been doing this long enough. I can remember back in the day when you had the OLTP databases, and you had the database analysis, and never the twain shall meet. So tell me a little bit about what makes you a transactional database rather than just a database.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we do see people doing some hybrid, a little bit of both, a little bit of that. Computers have gotten faster and databases have gotten better. But realistically, what we stick to is scaling out the transactional throughput of your system, right? So our job is to maximize scaling out as many writes and reads as possible, as many of those really important and consistent pieces of your infrastructure. We want to be that bedrock, and then we want to give you the tools to get that to a Snowflake, or get that to a Redshift, or get that to a BigQuery. But ultimately, what we view our job is not speeding up those analytical queries. And yes, people will run them ad hoc on the database, and we want to make sure they work. But what we optimize for is really that transactional throughput, that someone's logging in, someone's sending money, someone's buying a product. And that's what we think our kind of core competency is. What we set out to do is to make sure you can scale that as far as possible. And that comes with trade-offs, right? No long running queries, no long running transactions, and things like that. So we're trying to really be the best in one thing. and make sure that we can help you bring in whatever it is, your data team is using or your other teams are using. But we want to make sure that, what we're good at, we're really good at. And then we can help bring in folks who are really good at the analytics, really good at kind of some of that other things, and make an ecosystem out of it. So it's not just us doing everything.
Okay, so let's ask the important question here. For years, one of the big reasons that mainframes hung on was because they are known to be transaction monsters. If you just need to blast transactions, a mainframe's a really good way to do it. Is cloud in general, and are you specifically, scalable enough, fast enough so that you can legitimately compete against mainframes if a company is looking at that level of transaction requirement?
Yeah, fantastic question. So I'll say I'm a big fan of the mainframe. I think what's old is new in a lot of different ways, and people look past a lot of that because it's not fun and it's boring. The cloud is more fun. I'm a big fan of the cloud. I'm a big fan of whatever works, but we recently benchmarked our system. We wanted to show off some fun kind of vanity metrics, and you can't trust a benchmark until you've independently verified it, of course. But we recently scaled our system up to a million QPS, and many of that being transactions per second using a benchmark. And we hit it at about 40 shards, but we can go to 80, we can go to 160, we can go to 320, we can go to 640. And so the beauty of the cloud really is being able to say, you don't have to buy the biggest machine. You can buy a lot of the smaller machines, and you can just keep adding on and adding on and adding on. And that's really the strength, I think, above mainframes is you're not buying something for a nameplate capacity rating of this many transactions. You can buy the thing at a tenth the size of that. And if your business happens to grow 10x, you can grow into that on the cloud with incremental spend the whole way.
All right. Well, last question, because we all have heard the horror stories about people who went into a mainframe lease with a certain level of transaction. Somebody got a little happy, went 2% over that, and suddenly they were in the next tier for the next year and got a bill for $1 bazillion. So with the way that you do things, are you able to let a customer dynamically flex? That's been one of the classic strengths of the cloud. And can someone do that with you? If someone does have, say, bursty transaction levels, is that a good situation for considering a solution like yours?
Absolutely. And like you said, huge strength of the cloud. So a great example is Black Friday comes around, and that's a really stressful time for a lot of our customers, right? They're scaling their systems out 10x, but for 72 hours or for 96 hours, to the point where they can't keep that amount of resources. They can't buy a mainframe for just that 1 week of time. And so they come to us and they say, look, here's our Black Friday plan. Our traffic climbs up on this day. It lasts about this long. We expect this to be peak. And with the click of a button, they can go ahead and 10x their resources, increase the size of each of their shards, increase their shard count. They can go through a Black Friday and ride through a Black Friday, no problem. And then when that's over, they can go ahead and click the button and shut all of that infrastructure off. And because the cloud's billed by the hour, it might have cost 10 times as much, but for 7 days, they don't have to worry about, oh, we got to get the second one in, or we got to get that dusty mainframe plugged in, or even the equivalent, right, where you've got racks of servers that sit there for playing video games, 9/10 of the time, and then all of a sudden you turn them on for Black Friday. The cloud really enables the dynamism that I think businesses need in the 21st century.
One thing I want to jump to really quick is the fact that obviously, since it's the back end, you're storing data, like there are some restrictions, obviously, like in the EU for compliance, where you store your data is very important. So if, like, let's say users who are accessing an application, but they are really from the EU, or they are, that kind of thing. How does PlanetScale handle this type of thing? Does it rely on the application service to be able to tell what kind of instance they're accessing, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a lot of what it is, and that's a really good question. So this is where I think a lot of the serverless and next generation edge technologies are starting to help. I think they're a double-edged sword, again, like a lot of other serverless technologies where, you can scale really far, you can do a lot of things that you couldn't otherwise, but then you start to ask yourself why you're doing them. But what the edge allows you to do is push your application code out to 27, 60, hundreds of points of presence all around the world. At that point, you can serve a user's request and say, great, I'm right here, I'm in this country. And with PlanetScale, you can also distribute that data, over to different places. You can say, great, I'm going to serve this request from just this geography. Now, that's not all on PlanetScale, right? You've got to code your application, you've got to set everything up to be able to do that. But this is a great example, I think, of where all of these new technologies fit together and kind of form a mesh that let you do some of these things that would have been, undreamable 20 years ago.
Now, as a related question, you mentioned obviously a lot of availability there at different regions. Now, I've worked with global companies around the world, and some of them run into this issue where their data, their service might be within a I guess you could say gated region that can't access a lot of things, and they have to go far off into several remote regions in order to access data, so things are very slow. How do you guys handle that type of thing from an availability perspective?
Yeah, that's super hard. And honestly, that's the kind of thing where we're always working on getting better and better and better. We've got infrastructure deployed all around the world and, every continent pretty much but Antarctica. And we're constantly having to kind of optimize and figure out how to battle the speed of light. But at the end of the day, the speed of light is the speed of light. So if you've got a user or if you've got a service or a process on one side of the world and it's got to do something on the other side of the world, all you can do is optimize it and make sure that that light's traveling the closest to the straightest path possible. So we've spent a lot of time building TLS termination at the edge and building services that can backhaul traffic on the PlanetScale network and get them to where they need to be the fastest. But similar to what we're talking about with, sharding and cross-shard transactions, at the end of the day, the best thing you can do is distribute your data as close to the user as possible. And for us to give you the toolkit to be able to do that on the application side, on the database side, and then kind of help you build an architecture that's region aware, zone aware, or something like that.
Unfortunately, time flies when you're having fun. We're running a little low on time. Thank you so much, Nick, for being here. I do want to maybe give you a chance to tell the folks at home where to learn more about PlanetScale. I also want to ask, what if a hobbyist wants to try it out? Is there some kind of free tier that they can try out?
Two really good questions. So, my plug here, go to planetscale.com or just tweet at me on Twitter at Nick Van Wig while Twitter's still up. And we do have a free tier indeed. So just sign up on PlanetScale, pick out the free tier. There's, no credit card required or anything like that. It's free, for at least a year, and just play around with it. Honestly, you get access to most of our features, some of the best-in-class schema management, some of the best-in-class kind of workflow tools, as well as a world-class database. Tell your friends, tell your coworkers about it. And honestly, all we hope is that people come see the technology and see what we're building, and then go from there and grow on the platform.
I'm a weekend warrior myself, so I'll definitely try that out. But I do want to ask one last question here before we close up. Obviously, the organizations, they might want to, start the migration process. Do they contact somebody specific at PlanetScale? Who do they reach out to?
Yeah, so head to planetscale.com/contact. Actually, we have a self-serve migration flow as well. That's great. So you plug your database information in wherever it is on-prem or in the cloud. We can actually slurp that data right out and put it in PlanetScale. It's the super cool zero downtime migration. We spent a lot of time optimizing it. But if you've got a more complicated setup or if there's networking problems or something like that, we have a world-class support team who'd be more than happy to kind of help you debug and get you onto the service.
Thanks again. Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another hour of the best selling enterprise and IT podcast in the universe. So definitely tune your podcaster to TWiT. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially my fabulous co-host, starting with our very own Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, what's going on for you in the coming week? Where can people find you?
I'm going to catch up on my sleep.
You and me both, buddy.
Actually, one of the things I'm trying to get ready for is Maker Faire Miami. Kathy and I are planning on driving down to Miami and helping out our cousins in southern Florida. That ought to be a lot of fun, especially since we haven't done a lot of exploring in Miami yet. But I love hearing show ideas from our viewers. I drive the threads that I try to book based upon what the viewers are saying they want. We try. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't, but I make a best effort to try and book the thread. So today was all about database because we had people saying we want to learn more about databases and what are the options. And I learned a new word today, shards. That's interesting. Of course, I got started back in the days when it was a database and it was all hierarchical. And I did most of my work on card punches. So that's showing my age there. So we want to hear your opinions. We want to hear your show ideas. I'm still on Twitter, and I agree with Nick. While Twitter is still there, I'm ADV, NETLAB, Advanced Net Lab, which happens to be what some of my students came up with. And yes, chat room, you would not believe the variations on Chee that has been done. Some are not safe for work. My students had a lot of creativity, but we'll pass on that from in a public forum. But you're also more than welcome to throw email at me, and my email is Cheebert, spelled CheeBert @twit.tv. You're also welcome to throw email at TWiT@twit.tv, and that'll hit all the hosts. We'd love to hear from you, and we supposedly have viewers on every continent. I believe we still have a download viewer at McMurdo Sound Science Station in Antarctica. So love to hear from y'all.
Amazing. Thanks, Chee, for being here. Well, we also have to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, you're a busy, busy guy. What's coming up for you in the coming week? Where can people find you?
Well, tomorrow morning, really early, people can find me on the landing strip. That's the place where the shuttle landed over at Cape Canaveral, where I'll be running a 5K. One that I assume has very few hills and even fewer turns. So that's how I'll start the weekend. Aside from that, I'm rebuilding a 3D printer. I'm doing lots of fun stuff, helping on the final day of the fair. And then I am writing, lots of research to do. And I love it when I hear from members of the TWiT Riot about what they've seen, what they're curious about, what they'd like me to tell them about. They can do that on Twitter. I'm at KG4GWA. On Mastodon, I'm KG4GWA at mastodon.sdf. That's Sierra Delta Foxtrot.org. They can follow me on LinkedIn, Curtis Franklin, and Facebook, pretty much the same thing. No matter how you choose to do it, I'd love to hear from you. And if you're going to be at a conference like, say, Enterprise Connect in Orlando or the RSA conference in San Francisco, let me know. Would love to meet you in person.
Thanks, Curtis. Well, we also have to thank you as well. That's right. You're the person who drops in each and every week to listen to our show to get your enterprise goodness. And we want to make it easy for you to listen and catch up on your enterprise and IT news. So go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiT. There it is. There you'll find all the amazing back episodes, the show notes, the co-host information, guest information, links that we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos, you'll get those helpful subscribe and download links. That's right. You'll support the show by getting your audio version, your video version of your choice. Listen on any one of your devices, on any one of your podcast applications, because we're on all of them. And the best way to support the show is to subscribe. So definitely subscribe. Plus, you may have also heard, that's right, we also have Club TWiT as well. It's a members-only ad-free podcast service with a bonus TWiT Plus feed that you can't get anywhere else, and it's only $7 a month. In fact, there's a lot of great things that come with Club TWiT, but one of them is the exclusive access to the members-only Discord server, which I'm on right now, and I can tell you there's a ton of amazing and fun channels on there. But not only that, you can chat with hosts, us, other hosts, producers. You can have separate discussion channels. There's special events that show up on there. Lots of fun stuff. So definitely join Club TWiT. Be part of that fun. Go to twit.tv/Club TWiT. Now, I want you to also know that there's also corporate group plans as well for Club TWiT. It's a great way to give your team access to our ad-free type podcasts. And the plans start with 5 members at a discounted rate of $6 each per month. And you can add as many seats as you like. And this is really a great way for your sales department, your IT department, your developers, your tech teams, your support teams to stay on top of all of our podcasts. And just like regular memberships, they can actually join the TWiT Discord server as well and get that TWiT Plus bonus feed. So definitely join Club TWiT, be part of the fun and the movement. twit.tv/Club TWiT. Now, after you subscribe, you can impress your family members, your coworkers, your friends with the gift of TWiT. That's right. Give it to them, because talk about some pretty fun and interesting tech topics on the show. I guarantee they will find it fun and interesting as well. So definitely have them be part of the fun as well, and have them subscribe. Now, if you subscribe already, we do the show live. We're doing it live right now. That's right, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time on Fridays. That's at live.twit.tv. There you can choose any one of the streams that we have there. And we're doing it live. Come see how the pizza's made, the behind the scenes, the banter, all the fun we do during the show and after. Definitely check it out live. If you're going to watch the show live, you got to jump into the infamous IRC channel. That's right, irc.twit.tv. Just go there on your website. You can join the channel, and that's our Twit Live channel. And there are a lot of amazing people in there. And in fact, they're giving us some amazing show titles right now. So thank you guys for all your support and all your fun stuff that you do for each and every week. Why don't you should also contact me? Hit me up. Show ideas, topics about enterprise, things you want to talk about, maybe design ideas, that kind of thing. Twitter.com/LeoMam. I post all my enterprise tidbits there. Of course, you can always hit me up on Mastodon. I'm LeoMam at twit.social. Of course, I'm also Louis Maresca on LinkedIn. I got a lot of people reaching out to me on that platform nowadays as well, obviously. Plus, I love having great conversations. So just hit me up any way you can. I want to hear from you. And if you want to know what I do during my normal work week at Microsoft, head up developers.microsoft.com/office. There we post all the latest and greatest ways for you to customize your Office experience. And if you're on Office 365 or M365 right now, if you open up Excel, there's an Automate tab. That is the new tab you want to play with, because that is where I live day in and day out, and it's a good place to be because it's lots of fun. So definitely check that out and be part of that. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially thank you to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week, and we really couldn't do the show without them. So thank you, Leo and Lisa, for all your support and all your support over the years. I want to thank everyone at all the engineers and staff at TWiT, because, again, they make it possible for us to do this show. I also want to thank Mr. Brian Chee one more time, because he's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer. He does all the bookings and the plannings for the show, and we couldn't do the show without him. So thank you, Cheever, for all your support. Of course, before we sign out, we have to thank our editor, Mr. Anthony, today, because he makes us look good after the fact, because I make quite a bit of mistakes during this show, so I want him to clean them up for me. So thank you, Anthony, for doing all that and making us look better and shiny. So thank you. Appreciate that, Anthony. Of course, we also have to thank our technical director for today. He's Mr. Ant Pruitt, and he's a talented guy because he does another show called Hands-On Photography. And I'll tell you, each and every week I learn something on this show. I watch it religiously, and in fact, I try things out almost immediately, and I've gotten better. In fact, all of the lighting in my room is due to that show. So definitely check that out. And what's going on this week in Hands-On Photography?
Oh, Mr. Lou, thank you so much, sir. This week we're talking about good old AI in photography. I'm about tired of talking about it, but I had to get something off of my chest about it. Shared my little 3-4 minutes of a rant, shared some benefits, and shared some interesting pictures there that were AI generated. That's supposed to be me right there. You notice it doesn't look like me at all. That's AI. So, yeah, it has its place, but just check out the show, twit.tv/HOP, and all of the discussions there, including the image of my head on the top of a whiskey tumbler. Why is that there?
Now, we had a great discussion about AI on TWiT last week, so definitely check that episode out. And I'll tell you one thing, this gives me an example. I do a lot of filters in Photoshop and so on, and some of the AI driven ones are actually really amazing because they can edge detect and find the edges. And so I'm all for those. But the stuff you just showed,
it's going to be some hit or miss here and there. But I get into that, and I will talk about some other tools in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Ant. Well, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.
Hey, we should talk Linux. It's the operating system that runs the internet, but your game consoles, cell phones, and maybe even the machine on your desk. But you already knew all that. What you may not know is that TWiT now has a show dedicated to it, the Untitled Linux Show. Whether you're a Linux pro, a burgeoning sysadmin, or just curious what the big deal is, you should join us on the Club TWiT Discord every Saturday afternoon for news, analysis, and tips to sharpen your Linux skills. And then make sure you subscribe to the Club TWiT exclusive Untitled Linux Show. Wait, You're not a Club TWiT member yet? Well, go to twit.tv/clubtwit and sign up. Hope to see you there.